You're listening to the Secure AF podcast.
Welcome to the Secure AF podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about world news and how it is affecting the cybersecurity for organizations. I've got Andrew Hickman here with me today, and we're going to be talking about some things that are happening in the news right now that you might be seeing, and some things that you might be thinking about on how to protect your organization because of those things. We're really excited to be here. Thanks for joining us. So, Hickman, let me ask you.
Yeah.
What do you think about right now, the everything that's happening in the news?
Well, with continued escalations and just increased tensions all around, right now, just as a member of a SOC team, it's best to be on your toes and know what to look for and stay informed as much as possible.
Yeah, that's really my big deal. You know, as a CISO, I'm thinking about all my clients. What do they need to do to be protecting their networks and their workstations? And right now, there's just a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, for sure.
The interesting thing is, I mean, this is not the first time, of course, we've had to deal with this.
Yep.
I'll tell you a real quick story. This was back in, I guess it was 4 years ago now. But we had just brought in a new SOC team in my previous place, and we were training them. So they were students, they were SOC students.
Yeah.
And one of the things I had them do was threat intel on a daily basis, where they'd go out, they would find anything that's out there that could be a threat to the organization. And then we would figure out what we would have to do to protect against that particular threat. And we had a student who, I walked in, I was just asking questions, just talking to him. And I asked him, I was like, well, what did you find today in the news? He goes, well, I found one, but I don't think it really affects us all that much. I was like, okay, well, what is it that you found? Well, this was just at the time which Russia was invading Ukraine. And there was a lot of things happening. It was that first of the year time frame. And he says, well, I found this article about a threat actor who was targeting Russian websites. And he says, and they're taking a lot of these down, but I don't think it affects us at all. I was like, well, okay, well, tell me about the threat actor. And he told me. And I said, well, do you think they're doing it from their own computers? Well, no, probably not. I was like, why do you think using our computers, the organizational computers, would be useful? And he thought about it for a minute. He says, well, we've got a lot of bandwidth. We have a lot of computers. We have a lot of computers that were set up the same way. That's like, right. So if they could get onto our computers, they could do a lot of damage, outbound, especially with our ISP connections. He goes, oh,
Yeah.
It's like, so why don't we go look for outbound connections from our network to Russia or Ukraine or whatever?
Yeah.
And we found some. We were able to shut them down. And, but from that threat intel, it was a great learning experience for him to take a news article that you find and then figure out how that risk is involved in your organization and then go find it and stop it. Now, were they actually attacking Russia with our computers? Maybe. I saw the connections. I shut them down. That was my job, was to protect the network.
Yeah.
But, we do this every day. And as we look at what's happening now, for the sake of the audience, I'm sure you guys have all seen the news. But there is a significant conflict with Iran right now, and I'm not going to go into the political issues on any of that. Right now, we're just worried about our networks. Whenever there's conflict, that could mean there's an increase in any sort of cybersecurity attack.
Yeah.
So that's really
just to kind of go off what you were saying there. You were sharing that story where, U.S. infrastructure might be a target indirectly. And we weren't even directly engaged in that conflict
Right.
and shift over to Iran now. And that is something that the U.S. is directly engaged in now.
Yeah.
And so it's even a little different when you have, known threat actors that reside within a particular country that, you know, if all out war is declared, you know, cyber war is out there.
Oh, yeah.
Attacking infrastructure is key, and it doesn't even have to be, long lasting effects. They could just be looking for short disruptions. But what that might mean for certain organizations varies widely.
Sure.
You could have a short disruption that, a DDoS attack from a threat actor that, you know, takes you down for a few hours to a couple days. Well, how much does that cost your organization at the end of the day?
Yeah.
And so there might be some companies that can take that head on and figure out how to prevent it and get ahead of the curve on that kind of stuff. And that's what we're wanting to talk about here.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. If we, the United States, is involved in any way in terms of any sort of war, and I was saying it's a war right now because they haven't declared war, but any sort of conflict, there's the the other side would use any benefit they could get from any sort of an attack. You
Yeah.
take a cybersecurity attack, and we know how bad cybersecurity attacks can be because we see it all the time, at least from an alias perspective. We see our organizations, our clients, whether it be incident response or any other, they get taken down, with ransomware, with, any sort of denial of service attack, and they go down, and it takes a lot of effort and money to get them back up.
Yeah.
It may take them weeks to be back up to functional. Some can't even recover. It hits them so hard that they might be able to limp along for 6 months, but eventually they shut down. So, you take these attacks, and these are kind of scattershot attacks sometimes. They're not
Yeah.
necessarily targeting them, but when you get a threat actor that has a very intense mindset of taking us down, taking down the United States, well, that changes things a little bit. Maybe it increases the number of attacks, maybe it increases the kinds of attacks. Maybe it really, it hones down the effectiveness of the attack because they're not just scattershotting; they're spear targeting an
Exactly.
organization.
Yeah,
And
because we really have to change the way that you look at it from a threat actor perspective as well. While, your run-of-the-mill everyday, threat actors that are doing ransomware, they're driven by money,
yep,
for the most part. There might be some other, that maybe they're chasing clout, maybe they accolades, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, a lot of those threat actors are after money.
right.
When we move into this subject, though, money is not really the always the driving force behind that. Um,
No, it's
and it makes things,
disruption.
yeah, it makes things a lot more difficult because these threat actors that we're talking about here aren't necessarily even concerned about, again, um, long-term disruption as much as just disruption in any way possible. And so, and we've seen that with a lot of these threat actors that are known or that have been active in the past is the MO has not been, get in and ransomware and, extortion. That's not it. What they want
Right.
is to get in and to disrupt um, um, production as long as possible.
Yep.
And that could be as simple as brute forcing their way into a system, changing all the account names and passwords, and locking people out.
Yeah.
Leave everything there, but you're just locked out of everything. There's no ransomware involved. They just take control of your operations.
Well, and that was we talked about an attack, I guess, a couple of weeks ago where what if an attacker got in, got on the domain, and just removed all the computer objects and user objects for that
Yeah,
matter?
yeah, that's exactly what we see. Again,
Yeah.
there's no ransom involved with that. There's no,
No.
hey, pay us money. That's just what they want to do. That is their aim, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So it's a in my mind, I know, for a bunch of reasons, it's great to be protected against all of it and be aware of all of it. But with
Right.
these type of attacks specifically that aim to disrupt and maintain control for as long as possible, it might be even longer to try to recover from something like that. So it's just important to be aware of what's going on, what the
Yep.
IOCs are, how you can defend yourself, what tools you have in place, and just kind of review from there just to strengthen the overall security of your organization.
Yeah, and I want to highlight something that you said. This is these are attacks. I mean, this is pure malicious attack. So this is not going to be something where someone gets in and they'll just hang around for a few months trying to figure out what's going on and try different avenues. They're going to get in if they can get the right access. They're just going to destroy things. They're going to disrupt
Yeah.
stuff. They're going to take down networks, take down computers. I mean, it's not they're not well, like you said, they're not going after it for the money. They're going after it for the
Yeah.
disruption.
Yeah. C2 is very common in these instances as well, mainly because it's that foothold, that,
Yeah.
that control of sustained control. Um, and so if they're able to gain access to environments, lock, people out, get C2 on it,
Yep.
it's a long road to recovery.
So for those in our audience who don't know what C2 is, tell us a little bit about what C2 is.
Yeah. So C2, or most, commonly command and control, um, it's infrastructure methods used by threat actors to manage and basically control compromised devices. Um, so it could be devices infected with malware, um, different type of software specifically for C2, like Cobalt. Um, and they do this in a coordinated attack. So the C2 server acts as a centralized hub that sends commands to those compromised devices. It's kind of where botnet comes from. Um, so in a botnet, the C2 server might instruct thousands of compromised endpoints to like either send spam emails, or mainly what we see is DDoS, or distributed denial of service attacks. And if you're not familiar with the DDoS, it's just think of all these zombie endpoints pinging or utilizing a specific protocol to reach out to this one device just to overload it. And they can do that for hours or days even. And so C2 can communicate over various protocols. It can do HTTP, HTTPS, or can even do encrypted channels. Some of them may use techniques like domain generation algorithms to evade detection. So it changes their domain to try to sneak past any kind of filtering. So that's kind of a 1,000-foot view of C2.
Yeah, it's when I think of it, I think about, you might have an attacking group that wants to attack a country. They want it to come from 1,000 different sources, so they can't just
Right.
block one and it takes the attack away. And that's where that command and control comes in. They get a hold of a whole bunch of computers. They use them all to attack a single source. It's that DDoS attack that you were talking about.
Right.
And it's
And
one of those.
yeah, that's one of the most frequent ones that we see, is
Yeah,
just what's the easiest way to disrupt, you know?
sure. Yeah, I mean, if they want to take down a network, they don't have to get on the network. They just have to flood it.
Yep. Overload it.
So yeah. Well, it's there's a lot of pieces, and I promise we'll get into some more of the Iran direct IOCs and stuff in just a little bit. But let me ask you, you've been doing this a long time, and we kind of talked over the weekends as this was happening, and we've got some internal community groups that we talked in. And one of the things I told people is like, you have to stay vigilant. I mean, you have to, as things like this are happening, not only do you want to watch the news, what's happening, but you also take a look at your network. So What are some of the things that when you see this stuff happening out in the world, what is it that you look at to, you do a lot on the SOC side, you do a lot on firewall side, you do a lot on the networking side. So what are some things that you were thinking about when you saw what happened over the weekend happen and you start thinking about, okay, what do we have to do to protect networks?
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of an easy answer there. First thing is just go and looking and familiarizing yourself for known IOCs. That's kind of the top one, and IOC being an indicator of compromise. Um, that could be different network IOCs. So that could be like malicious IPs, domains, that like those will come from like CISA advisories, um, like um, like any kind of Iranian hosted C2 server, for example. File IOCs, so hashes for any type of malware. There are some known malware from these threat actors floating around there. Um, you can grab those from um, CISA sometimes has them. There's other locations that you can grab them. Email IOCs, so that's like phishing domains mimicking U.S. government or other vendors. Those will be known. Well, they'll say, "Hey, we've seen these threat actors in the past, spoof these domains specifically for attacks."
Yeah.
And kind of the one that's a little more difficult to identify in most instances is like behavioral IOCs. So that can be things like anomalous logins from foreign IPs, especially via like a VPN or RDP. And then unauthorized changes to like ICS configurations or mass file encryption. Those are different types of IOCs that we've seen with these threat actors. Just familiarize with yourself with those, and what tools do you have in place as an organization that you can put this data into to help
Yep.
protect yourself. And so to kind of touch on what you were saying, when I look at firewalls, depending on the type of firewall that you have and what kind of next generation firewall functionality do you have, web filtering, DNS filtering, setting up rules that's blocking particular protocols, especially from those known malicious, IPs. Looking at, what SIEM you have in your environment, making sure those IOCs are dumped into that tool, and as data comes into it, it's cross-referenced against those IOCs so that you can get alerting on it immediately. XDR capabilities. So if you're running like CrowdStrike, making sure all those file hashes are entered into CrowdStrike, um, to alert on or even quarantine those devices if they're seen. That's typically the way we play it, is when we know that there's an active threat campaign happening or a heightened risk, we'll take those hashes, and instead of just receiving alerts on them, we'll tell CrowdStrike, contain it. Let's stop it
Right.
before it even has an opportunity. Let's get in there and investigate. Even if it's something like a remote host that's critical, and at the end of the day, it's much better to kick it offline for 10 and 15 minutes while you can investigate,
Yes.
rather than give a threat actor 10 or 15 minutes into your environment.
Yes. That's really a key factor is, when we're talking about dwell time, and for me, when I'm dealing with tabletops and whatever, dwell time is how long have you seen something strange and you not knocked it off the network? Either turn that computer off or turn the network off or whatever. That dwell time is incredibly important. The sooner you can quarantine it and get it off the network, hopefully the sooner you can prevent damage or prevent bad things from happening. But I do want to kind of go back. One of the things that I encourage all of my clients to do is, this is not the time that this is the first time you're looking at your firewall. You should be monitoring your firewall all the time so you know what is normal. And then when a situation like this comes up, what is abnormal? If you regularly see attacks coming in from, let's say, China, and you block them, geolocate block or whatever. But then all of a sudden you see a whole bunch of stuff coming in from Ethiopia, or from Ukraine or whatever. You go, all right, wait a minute. That's odd. Is that just normal odd, or is this because of an attack or something like that? So you've got to be comfortable in your tools, whether it's your firewall, your SIM, your EDR, any of those things. You got to kind of know what's normal, so that when you see abnormal stuff, you can go, wait a second, that's weird. Let's shut that down real quick. So that's super critical. And what I tell people is, even if you don't have some of the tools, you always have some sort of logging, whether it's Active Directory logging of logins. It might be Office 365 logins, your firewall logs. But how many times have we gone into an organization where their firewall was not logging anything?
Yeah, it happens a lot. And that's kind of the crux of it is it's one thing to have logs. That's great. Forensically, it's great. But the issue is that if you're not actively monitoring those, you can't use them defensively.
Yes.
It does you no good.
Yeah.
And that's one of the huge benefits of having like a SIM, is being able to have a place you could just dump all those logs and get a real-time analysis of all of them. Or you hire someone that sits there and watches logs all day. But
Right.
again, just to reiterate, like logs are fantastic. We want them. We love them. We need them. But they are forensic at best unless
Yeah.
someone's monitoring and looking through them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a thing. I've had a situation, this was years ago, and I had somebody who was collecting my logs. He collected everything. Everything.
I like that guy.
And the problem was, it was a lot. I
Yeah.
mean, we had about 50 terabytes of logs for a 2-week time period, or however long it was, and maybe it was 30
It's quite a
days.
bit, yeah.
And I agreed with the logs are a good thing, but you've got to know what you have, and you got to be able to query them. Just having data on disks and you can't go through it, it doesn't serve you any purpose. It becomes a problem.
Right.
It gives you a false sense of security is what it does, is because you may not be collecting the correct logs. I mean, there's all kinds of settings in Windows to turn on the right kinds of logs. And if you don't do that, then the logs you capture just are worthless. So,
Yep.
but anyway, back to kind of the world news type stuff. I agree with you. And those were when I was talking to my clients, first thing I did was, okay, go check your basic login logs. Do you have anybody logging in from weird places? It's like, check your firewall logs. Do you have anything that's being blocked that is not normal? I mean, again, people should have a basic understanding of what their firewall activity looks like and their login activity looks like, so they can tell what abnormal is, so that they could, take actions. And then, of course, if you've got a SOC, which is becoming more and more common for organizations to either have a paid SOC like us or have their own SOC where they're actually monitoring this stuff. Just keeping an eye on what's happening on their workstations, for their EDR, and, any logs coming in that's going into that SOC. It's really important. The other thing that I encourage to people is let your staff know. I mean, this is part of security awareness training, is not just doing security awareness training once a year. It's, hey, we have an increased threat. Be careful. Be careful of increased phishing attacks or business email compromise or whatever it may be. Let them know that they need to be a little bit more cautious, because we have an increased threat. And I think that that's what a lot of people don't get. Their tech team might go in and start looking at stuff, which is great, but they don't ever go and tell anyone out in the organization. It's like, hey, be really careful. We have an increased threat for this reason or that reason. So be careful on your email. Be careful if you see anything weird pop up on your computer. Again, we're not trying to cry wolf. We're just, when the risk rises, then your response needs to rise. And it's warranted. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think
there's there's another part that I want to talk on. I don't think it's discussed a whole lot that I think you'll be able to appreciate.
Mhm.
I'd like to talk about incident response preparation for,
Yes.
let's say worst case scenario, where, uh, how does how does an organization, you know, um, or how does an organization prepare for this type of event if it does happen?
Yeah.
And I know some of the things that we've talked about in the past is developing playbooks for
Yeah.
ransomware, specific attacks, espionage scenarios,
Yep.
testing IR plans with like red team exercising, simulating these specific attacks,
Yeah.
especially if you're in a sector that could, be a valuable target for them.
Oh yeah.
Things like oil and gas, transportation, healthcare, anything
Any of
that
the
could,
infrastructure. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, yeah,
Well, I mean, this is just something, it was 2 weeks ago. One of my clients and I were talking, and I asked them about it was incident response and disaster recovery, business continuity discussion. So we were covering all three. But I kind of asked them, I was like, well, what is your SHTF plan?
hey,
What happens when, and this is something I cover in my tabletops a lot, where communications are down, can't get into work, who has to come in, who has to stay home, and all these things. Well, I have a playbook for that. I mean, I wrote a playbook, and in this particular case, I modified it for them. But it was the very basic information of, okay, let's say there is a kinetic attack inside the U.S. and we shut down now. And this has happened through, a couple of times. It happened at 9/11. Happened certainly during COVID. I mean, there's several times where, something has happened and the world has gone into an unknown state, here in the U.S. And the question comes up is, okay, who needs to come into work? Who needs to stay home? How do you communicate with them? How do you communicate when there is not your telephones or email, your network is down? So I've got a playbook that I wrote, and I shared it with the team. I guess, my modified version that I had, I shared it with you guys so you guys could see it. But it starts with just the FEMA requirements of 3 days of food and water and electricity, having battery backup for your phones. And then we, start putting into place, okay, who's going to be primary, who's going to be secondary. Primary people have to see about trying to get it in. My previous job, we had students living on campus. So there had to be, for fire control and all, there's different systems that had to be online. So there was people that had to make it into work to keep those systems in place and keep them running. But then other times you may not want people coming in.
right,
How do you communicate that? So this playbook covers all of that. And it's when I give it to people or when I show people, usually it's after I've done a tabletop and the tabletop scenario is, bad things have happened, network is down, DNS is down, whatever. And they're like, I don't know how we're going to communicate. I
right,
don't know who to call. And you need to prepare for that before it happens. Trying to do it ad hoc is just a bad idea. So, because of that, when we do these sorts of things, we have to practice. You've got to have these playbooks. One of the other big things is I've gone into organizations, well, you've been there too, where they've had an incident. And we ask them, where's your incident response and where's your playbooks? They're like, well, it was on that server that just got encrypted.
yep, yep,
Okay. And even me, I have an IR binder that has all of my sample playbooks, all my policies, my procedures. I mean, everything that I use in my tabletops and stuff, I have a copy of it here. And I use this for my clients as well. If they don't have anything,
that's all.
at
It's
least
a
I
good
have
example, yeah,
something I can start with. But it's printed
yep.
out. It's a copy. I have multiple copies, but
It's an air gapped backup.
it is absolutely an air gapped backup.
Yeah,
And and it's simple. you know, 2 hours worth of prep can save you hundreds of hours of anguish.
Sure can.
So
Sure can. I mean, we see it time and time again,
yeah,
unfortunately. And it's just the truth of it is a lot of the times we see organizations that, they do or they did have all those things.
sure.
They really did, but they weren't
But
stored. There were
they
no
did.
backups.
Yeah.
And it wasn't air gapped, you know?
Yeah.
And
Well,
so,
here's something. If you want to, please, out in the audience, please don't take this the wrong way. But if I was going to take down a lot of organizations, I would take down password managers.
oh
I
yeah,
would DDoS them, because how
yeah,
many people have exported their password manager to a CSV, either printed it out or put it on USB or even a CD-ROM? I know those are getting harder and harder to find CDRs, but put it in a safe somewhere. That way there's a backup you can go and get.
yeah. Well, we saw that ransom event with the company not too long ago that uh, the threat actors were able to move laterally through their environment because their password manager got compromised. The
Yeah.
threat actors got entry into account that
Yep.
got them access into a password manager that gave them the keys to everything.
Yeah.
And so they just changed passwords from there, and you're stuck.
Yeah.
It's a difficult spot.
Yeah, it is. Now, I'm not saying don't use password managers, by the way. I think password
Keep
managers
them
are wonderful.
secure.
Keep
Yeah,
them
keep
secure,
them secure.
multi-factor, make sure you have copies of it. It is
Least
all,
privilege. Yeah.
yep. It's all about the layers of the onion, so,
Yeah, have them
well,
segmented out so that, the people in HR don't have a domain admin
yep.
password stored somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Iran specifically.
Yep.
Of course, at the time of this recording, we have seen kinetic attacks happen in Iran, and Iran has threatened to attack the United States.
Yep.
And again, I don't want to go into political anything. We're just stating what is being said on the news. So from that point of view, we do have to think a little bit about what are the things that we would be looking for in our environments to protect our organizations. And one of our engineers went through and grabbed a list of threat actors and the different primary targets and the sources to get more information from. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Number one, where to get information about these IOCs. And number two, I thought we might go through at least some of the names, just so people who are listening to this can go do a little bit more research and figure out what they want to look on. So let me ask you just a very specific question. How do we find information, or how would you find information about threat actors from Iran? So if that was just that you heard about this attack, you really wanted to just find information about that, what would you do? Being from the SOC, and so the things that you've done in the SOC, what is it you're going to do?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing I'm going to go do is pull up CISA's website to see what advisories have been posted on them specifically.
Yep.
From there, I would use different dark web tools that we have just for OSINT to try to go find more information, maybe more in depth. Um, there are other websites you can go to see just known attacks, maybe how active they are, how active they've been. Um, the problem that I've seen with these threat actors that we're looking at now is that some of them just aren't really active anymore,
Yeah.
or they aren't active under that name anymore. And
Right.
so it's important that they may be transforming in a way to maybe a new name, or the group name is different, but the underlying techniques are most likely going to be similar or the same.
Right. Yeah, and it's an interesting thing. I mean, we were talking about a nation state. Um, those people do change. And if that was their job for the nation state, they might go off on their own and that was doing
Yeah.
it by themselves or joining another group or whatever. Some of these might be contracted by the nation state to utilize their techniques to attack a country or an entity. So, um, one of the things that I did very quickly is I got out onto community forums, people that I trusted, and I started asking questions. So, we have here in Oklahoma, we have a pretty good Discord channel for cybersecurity people. I know a lot of the ISACs will get out there and they will talk. I was part of Ren Isaac before. There's MS ISAC. There's ones for almost every industry out there. There's information sharing groups that you can
Yeah.
get out and ask questions. So, there's a lot of good information out there of where you can find either stuff that is published, so like the CISA publishments or, anything like that,
Yeah.
or what people are actively seeing.
And one of my favorite ones is social media. I mean, so
Yes, absolutely.
um, the amount that we learn just from being on X
Yep.
is pretty astounding. A lot of the times people want to be the first one to either break the news or, these threat actors are actively on social media as well, and they're trying to
Yep.
get notoriety. Um, they're active that way. So there's, a lot of different methods. We typically see more activity and notoriety chasing within,
Yep.
the dark web, you would call it, on
Right.
different forums. But for anyone who doesn't really delve into that, social media is a great place to kind of get a bearing of what's going on, what threat actors are active, and what's happening where.
Well, and I think every cybersecurity professional should have 10 or 15 sites that they go to on a regular basis and just see what people are saying.
Yeah,
I've got one of my browsers that I've got allocated to just that. It's got a whole bunch of bookmarks of different websites that I go to, and I pull information from there, and I usually give a threat intel report to my clients. But I think every cybersecurity professional should do that. They should have these websites. I mean, whether it be X, Reddit, um, dark web websites, news sites, things like, well, I mean, even the famous ones like Krebs on Security, Bleeping Computer. There's Hacker News. I mean, there's all these different ones, and you can get information from all of them, and then you do your correlations on what you think is good and what you think is bad or what is
for
useful
sure.
to your organization.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah. There's
um,
different, there's different OSINT tools out there. Dark web informers, they have a list of some decent ones out there that you can go and utilize. And there's a lot of, open source tools out there that if you're a member of a SOC, you can go get your hands on, play around with it, and figure out what kind of value add it might have for your team.
yeah, and that's the thing is you've got to get out there and ask those questions. Say, I mean, you've got to go and look for those things, and then of course you share it. You share it with your team, share it with your community. I've got a tool on my phone called Aggregator. This is one I've used for several years, but it's kind of like an aggregator for RSS feeds. When we used to use RSS feeds for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But I've got, I don't know, well, I haven't looked at it today. I've got a lot of stuff out there today. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got 10 or so things that it just sits there and goes and grabs and pulls it back, and I get an alert whenever I have new ones. So I can stay on top of news. But those sorts of things are great.
Yeah,
Uh,
another one that's kind of, it's getting better as time progresses, but talking about AI, there's different LLMs out there that you can
yep.
dump this information into or ask these questions to.
Yep.
And you've it's getting more accurate as time progresses too. So,
Sure.
utilizing different types of AI and things like that as a useful tool is, I don't see anything wrong with that.
No,
We're just
I mean,
going
it's
to
a tool.
see a continued shift to it.
Yeah.
So, there's that as well.
No, I agree. And I think, I'm always hesitant to recommend AI, even though I use it a lot. People need to have an understanding of what it is and know how to
Yeah.
use it correctly, how to build your
It
prompts.
can be wrong.
It absolutely can.
Yeah.
We talk about hallucinations and all kinds of different things.
Yep.
Sometimes, I said this into a presentation the other day. Um, AI will give you exactly what you ask it for.
100%. Yeah.
And if you say, please create me blah, blah, blah that supports this, it'll create it for you, whether it
Yeah.
existed before or not. It just creates it.
Yep.
And so you have to be really careful. But it is a huge resource that you can utilize. Um, Things that I've used it before in the past is where I need to look through some logs really quickly and I need to find certain things. I don't want to sit down and write the query to do it. I can ask ChatGPT or one of the other AIs, okay, I need a query that pulls this information from this log, or here's a
Right.
chunk of information. Now, of course, be very careful. The audience, do not put things into AI that you're not supposed to. Make sure there's no PII in there,
Yep.
anything that could be attributed to an individual. But if you have some information that you need to process quickly, AI might be able to help you. I'm not saying it's 100%, but it might be able to help
Yeah.
you.
It's getting better.
It is. It is. And as we use these tools will get better. So,
Yeah.
okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the threat actors. Again, we won't go into a lot of detail. We're getting up on time for us. But the list that one of our engineers put together really quickly this morning was the threat actors. If you do any searches out on the internet for these, whether it be on MITRE or any of the other websites for the threat actors, there's APT 33, APT 34, APT 35, APT 39. There's Tortoiseshell, Imperial Kitten, Muddy Water, Rocket Kitten, and Copycat. No, Copy Kittens. That's going to be really hard for me to say. Copy Kittens. Now, these are some of the threat actors we believe is from Iran, or has
Yep.
been associated with the with Iran. And they've got lots of aliases. I'm not going to go through the list here. And they have a lot of different targets out there for different industries that they target. And there's lots of different ways they do it. Now, again, this is just a list that we have put together, that we are looking at their IOCs that are known so that we can help our customers. It might be something for you guys to go do a bit more searching on. Again, you can find information out there. I tell you, the ones I was looking at over the weekend was 34 and 35 and Muddy Water. So those are the ones that kept coming up in my searches.
Yeah, I,
Um,
I would I would say they're all worth looking into their activity, exploits that they've done in the past, what their tactics are. But there's good sources out
yep,
there that you can go look up. My Tree being one of them.
yep,
APT 33, they particularly go after like energy, aerospace, defense sectors for the Middle East, US, and Saudi.
yep,
And so they're one to definitely watch out for. What we know about APT 34, they primarily target within the Middle East itself. So familiarize yourself with them. They have been active, but they may not be as, critical of a group as some of the other ones. Um, 30 APT 35 is definitely one that is concerning, um, mainly because they have targeted individuals,
yep,
academia, government entities, mostly in the U.S. and Israel, um, or anyone who goes against Iran. They
yep.
use a lot of social engineering tactics. They do custom malware. At least we've known them to do that in the past. So being familiar with those are pretty critical.
Yeah. And like I said, I mean, this is just a small list. There may be more. There may be other people that's not one of these groups doing things. But again, any information you can get to protect your environment, the better. Just
Yeah.
going and even just being aware of what to look for is hugely beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of them, there's no proof of a connection. It's more
Yep.
suspected connection. So,
Yep.
not to get too in the weeds there. This is just more about um, understanding the threat actors,
Yeah.
understanding techniques they've utilized in the past for attacks, and then protecting your organization from those types of attacks and how they may have evolved
Yep.
just to the best of your ability.
Yeah. And that's really important to think about is your a lot of these attackers use the same tactics, whether it be phishing or an email bomb or whatever it may be. They're going to use those same tactics. So if you protect yourself from a threat actor that uses those tactics, you could be protecting yourself from other threat actors that use the same tactics. So, we want all of our controls to be in place to protect us. Being aware of the kinds of attacks these attackers use is really just that next level up of verifying and validating those controls are working.
Yeah, and a lot of it's just it's their broader strategy of like asymmetric warfare. It's
Yes.
just how they're targeting adversaries for like espionage, disruption, or just any kind of like political influence. A lot of these groups just share tools between each other. Um, and like most of their C2 is cloud-based.
Yep.
So Dropbox, OneDrive, or even encryption channels just to evade detection. So being aware of that, and being aware, like you were talking about, reviewing logs and seeing certain type of traffic over your network. If your organization doesn't utilize Dropbox or OneDrive and you're seeing this type of traffic on your environment, it's probably a red flag.
Yep.
And most recent trends, like posts on social media, this was in June. This was this year. There is heightened activity, particular from like APT 34, APT 39, and the group known as Charming Kitten. And they're targeting governments, critical infrastructure, across, you know, not just in the US, but in these other countries as well.
Yep. Yeah. And number one, these attacks are not going to go away, even if all the other stuff goes away in terms of the political upheaval and all those things. These attacks are going to be out there.
Right.
We might be at higher risk right now just because of what's happening,
Yep.
but you stay
Geopolitics.
exactly. But you still should stay vigilant on all these attacks, understand what's happening and how it's going to affect your organization.
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay, I think we're right up on time. Do you have any last words you want people to really think about this stuff, whether it be about these specific threat actors or just kind of the issue as an overall?
Yeah, I would say my kind of closing remarks would be, um, these threats are real, they're out there. But being prepared for them, it really just makes all the difference. Stay vigilant, um, utilize all the tools that you have to your advantage. Find the IOCs, find these things, put them in place. It'll help you sleep better at night.
Yep.
And just, stay alert.
Yeah, I agree. Practice, practice, practice. Yeah, practice this stuff. Make sure it's going to work for you. Understand what you need to do, and then practice it.
Yep,
So,
absolutely.
all right. Well, Hickman, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me. This was a lot of fun.
Hey, my
And
pleasure. Thanks for having me.
yeah, absolutely. If you guys don't know, Hickman here is also doing the SOC Brief, our weekly podcast for SOC threat intel and IOC. So check out his podcast. It's releases on Wednesday. The hope is for people to listen to it on the drive in on Thursday, so they can take that information and go and help their organization. So Hickman, thanks again. We appreciate it. Everybody else, thanks for joining us today on the Secure AF podcast. We've got some great topics coming up here soon for the next couple of episodes. So catch us on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Have a great day.
The Secure AF podcast is a production of Alias Cybersecurity. Visit us online at aliascybersecurity.com. All rights reserved.